All right, time for another great episode of Bring Your Own Security Radio. I appreciate that you spend your next 30 or so minutes with me talking about tech things that I like talking about. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about risk and threats and vulnerability, but I'm going to talk about them in a way that isn't your typical threat assessment, threat hunter, vulnerability management from a risk perspective entirely. What I want to talk about is big picture and breaking it down even into smaller picture. I work for a very large multinational company. In my work, I have people in the UK and overseas, and I have people in the US. Different organizations under one bigger umbrella. So when we do some threat hunting using Nessus or Rapid7 or any of the other tools, we can find things like, for example, Java. We all see Java in our environment probably. Or we all might see Firefox. Well, both of these are high-scoring CVSS threats ongoing on a daily and monthly basis. But if you have 8 or 9 different total organizations that use different software and across the board they use some of the same software like Office products, how do you completely get rid of a Firefox if someone uses a legacy app that isn't ready to be extracted from your environment? How do you get rid of Java if you have 3 or 4 applications that absolutely require Java? It's a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us. What if you have several organizations under your umbrella that some of them can get rid of some of these vulnerabilities and some can't? And then you just have to decide, I'm going to accept a certain amount of risk based on the needs of my company. And then I'm going to figure out how I can harden those applications or those servers or what I can do with those things until I can completely get rid of them. One of the methods that we have come to decide in more recent months, it hasn't even been years yet, is that we want to take a look at the vulnerability itself. Of course, we want to look at the things that are very risky, very bad types of things, but we also take a look at how easy they are to exploit. Could a novice do it? Could a medium script kiddie do it? Could, someone who is a state-level threat actor do it? And then we want to take a look at the different attack vectors. Do they have to be on our network? Do they have to be just wireless? Do they have to be, can they do it remotely? And if we can take a few minutes and talk about internally with our companies, okay, what if this application is only accessible internally? We know that our firewalls have been good. We've got good perimeter protection, or as good as it can be. You require VPN-only access. You don't have public web pages or login pages. Maybe your exchange is hosted through Office 365 or some other external place. And then that way you can decide, what am I going to do with these things I can't get rid of? And of the things that show up on my threat report, or my assessment, or my risks, or maybe you have auditors that come in and tell you all these great things because they use automated tools, but they don't really know your environment. So they give you this grandiose 50-page report. They charge you thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars to do this test, so to speak. But they haven't actually taken into consideration your environment and how it's used and who uses it. And under what circumstances. Those are all the things that I believe and that our companies have decided that we're going to start considering when we decide, okay, these 14,000 computers that have this problem need to be addressed fairly immediately, or these 200 computers or servers that have this problem need to be addressed ASAP. When you look at a scoring model, say a Nexpose or Nessus and their Tenables solutions, they might score, something that's a CVSS score, say 9, right? And it's got a risk level of 614, and you have 10,000 computers. But it takes a fairly efficient and very good hacker or threat level or nation level threat actor to make that compromise or hurt you. But you have 200 machines at a 6.3 CVSS score, and it can be fairly easy executed against you. Which one would you rather tackle first? I think you should tackle the one that's the easiest, because most compromises are going to be the lowest hanging fruit. And by now, if you're in a security field, you know that the majority of compromises now come from phishing and other methods that expose user-level credentials. And more often than not, these users are not domain admins or even, maybe local admins, depending on how you have your environment. So if they are basic level users, but you only need a certain amount of access and a certain amount of knowledge, then those users getting phished are certainly going to put your environment more at risk than some, multi-level, multi-action threat that your firewalls hopefully will detect, or any of your other defense in-depth mechanisms and security layers that you have will give you some indication that a compromise is underway. At the very least, even if you take a look at these more serious ones and you consider, I have to get them done, if there's a lot of them, and when I say a lot, in my environment, we're talking about 100,000 plus users, and across the globe, we're talking about more than 20,000 devices. So for us to mitigate something at that scale definitely takes planning in certain cases, because different time zones, different support functions, we have to coordinate to make sure people are on staff, etc. Whereas a patch, something that's desktop related, or servers that affect 10 or 20 servers, can usually be excuse me, got a cough there, can certainly be mitigated during a regular maintenance window. So there are opportunities to progress. And if you're looking at, say, like a top 25 scoring model for your environment, or maybe you're doing the CIS 20 types of framework, it certainly can lead you down different paths of what's important. Our organization actually does a little bit of both of what I just mentioned. We certainly look at top 25 reports, automations, automated scans, and we're building out automated remediations based on things. And so between the orchestration and the automation, we're getting to a point where some of the easier things can be handled in a more automated function between tools and SCCM and other tools in Windows devices to help us not have to do things manually. And then, of course, when we compare those software top 25 type vulnerabilities versus more of a framework kind of mentality like the CIS, then we are, taking steps like, CIS wants to know Do you automate your asset management and tracking? Do you automate your remediations? More policy and procedure kind of things. So the two can certainly work hand in hand, although each has their own distinctive criteria, distinctive functions, and you certainly have to pay attention to both sides of that equation. So interesting. I'd be interested in hearing how you view risk and vulnerability. And when I say risk, I don't mean like a CISA or a risk auditor coming in and telling you you have to show me evidence of this or that. You have to work with them and maybe show them, yes, we take these top 5 bad things seriously, and we have plans in place to either accept those risks, we're in the planning stage to mitigate them, or we have already remediated them. And then you can also say, but take a look at these 15 things that we've already pulled out of our environment that could have caused us a more immediate problem, maybe not as severe of a problem. And I think that's really where the line gets drawn between security people and auditors is you take a look at, as a security person, how many bad things can happen and how easy is it for you to get me and how challenging would it be for me to recover from that. Whereas from an auditor perspective, you might be looking more at, what really bad things could happen and why haven't you done something to prevent it more or put stops in place or whatever the case might be. So definitely different views, but they certainly converge at some point, and a lot of that depends on your environment. So, and if you're a smaller company, when I say smaller, 100 users or less, 65, 70 computers, these things are, oddly enough, in your environment, probably a little more important. And the reason for that is most companies of that size really do not have a robust IT function. They normally don't spend a lot of money on outside consultants at a very high level. You might bring in the networking people or the Cisco people or the firewall people for you, the wireless people, help you get things put together. Or if you have a problem, but day to day, do you call them and say, hey, where are my holes? Can you help me make sure that I'm protected? Are you making your Windows updates mandatory, your antivirus? Or do you allow people to say, no, remind me later, or not do them at all? Or do you not have any automation to that process and you just hope everybody stays on top? Do you have a VPN functionality, or do you just let somebody log in from the web? Those kind of things are more typical of a small business and getting compromised, as well as across the board, large, small, or whoever. Education. If your users are not tech savvy, and even if they are, I know domain administrators, network admins, high-level people in the IT field that have had their access compromised because they get in a hurry. They get a little careless. They see something that, hey, I know what this is. I've seen this a million times. And they kind of blow through things when they maybe shouldn't. So education is really, kind of step 1A or 1B about keeping your environment safe. You can buy all the cool things, and you can upgrade a whole bunch of cool software, and you can make things rock hard, and nobody's getting in. But the minute one of your people click the wrong email, they've let somebody in some way. And once they've done that, if you don't have the other tools or monitoring or capability, whether it be by people and manual process or by automated process, then you could be hacked and compromised for a long time and not even know it. And those are the things that we see in the media these days are reports of, we got compromised, last year, but here we go now, we just found out, or, months ago, or whatever the case may be. It's very rare that you hear of someone talking about being compromised yesterday or today or last week even. By and large, you hear about big compromises months or possibly even years after the compromise happened. And some of that is because they were good at keeping the secret and they didn't want their stock prices to plunge or their customers to worry. But some of it is because they didn't know either. And there are some mandatory reporting. So think about it. How do you decide what's important in your environment? And, I'm not telling you that not attacking the hardest, worst things first are important, but take a look at the overall picture of where you stand. If you're a small company and you went and bought a $50 wireless router and you plugged it in, and in your office you got 35 computers, and everybody runs their antivirus and everybody runs their Windows updates, and you're happy. But you're running one of those, the cheapest I could buy routers from the neighborhood technology store. You bought something off of Amazon. What if you didn't do anything else? What if you didn't upgrade the firewall? That software that runs those firewalls needs upgraded. There are features that you can turn on and off. Most services are turned on by default on those functions. So did you log into your new wireless router firewall thingy that you bought and kind of harden it down? Did you upgrade it? Did you do all that you could to protect that from an outsider? Did you change the login username and password for that device? These are all the things hackers look for. And once they get into your router of your small business, they can change your password, reroute your traffic to go through their servers. So even though you might see all the web pages come up that you want, you might not see any problems. If they reroute all of your traffic, they can capture all of that information, passwords that you type, documents that you send out via email. All that stuff will go through their servers first. They capture a copy of that stuff, and then now they have all the data from you they want, and you never knew you were compromised because they didn't attack your computers. They attacked your router, and they changed the DNS of the router. And if you don't know what DNS is, it's called Domain Name Service. Go and maybe just look it up on Google or Wikipedia. But effectively, a DNS is when you type in a name, say yahoo.com. Computers do not understand names. They understand numbers, IP addresses. So the DNS services on a global scale convert that name to very specific, unique IP, and then route your web browser to that server, all in a millisecond. So it may not look like to you like it takes much, but there is something happening, some magic behind the scenes that take your computer from there. So that's just one example of how you can be compromised and not even know it. And it has nothing to do with your antivirus on your computer, your Windows updates, or how great your servers are. If your device is on the edge, the stuff that faces the internet are not equally managed and controlled and monitored, then you might as well not do the other stuff either, because you have a pretty good chance at losing your data or having further issues anyway. So just my advice, things to consider on how you look at vulnerabilities and risks as an IT security person. If you are like an owner, a manager type that doesn't put their hands into the IT security day to day, I would suggest that you ask your people, how do you decide what's important to protect us from? What steps do you take? And ask to see those plans. Every company should have kind of a blueprint or roadmap or other disaster recovery document or other patch management cycle documentation. And hopefully it's written down so it's repeatable. You know what to expect on a month-to-month basis. You know where servers exist as far as what their names are, what their IP addresses are, where they get their updates from. That stuff should be documented. That way, if somebody's on vacation, somebody gets sick, somebody retires, you have somebody that can step right in and take over with minimal interference and just being able to read the documentation and moving on. So ask. And even if you are someone who's been in the field for a long time and you just kind of, maybe you've been around your company 10 years and you just kind of know how you do things, does everybody know how you do things? Does the new person down the hall know what to expect from you if something happens to their system? Do you have the ability in plain English to tell someone else in your environment what's going on, what to look for, and how to fix it? Things to consider. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. So there's that topic. Another kind of side topic here. We're about 20 minutes into this, and I'm only going to spend about 30 minutes today. So I want to take a few more minutes and talk about a little bit of a different subject, one that you may or may not agree with. So indulge me if you will, and send me a tweet at BYOS Radio. I would love to hear your opinions. If you have another way that you consider threat and risk and vulnerability and how you manage those, I absolutely would love to hear those steps and the things that you consider important. Whether you agree with me or not is fine. I would just like to hear it because maybe we need to incorporate your ideas, and I'll be happy to share them. So, again, tweet at BYOS Radio, and I look forward to hearing from your stuff. Lastly, I want to talk about the many, many security conferences. It's beginning of 2020, and, this year is a new year. New security conferences all over the place. You've got, obviously some of the big ones are RSA, DEF CON, Black Hat, and then a bunch of regional ones. Secure World travels around the country doing their thing. And then in different areas of the country, you have Wild West Hacking Fest up in the Dakotas, up in Michigan. You've got the different events that float around. Unfortunately, we saw, the end of Dave Kennedy's events in Louisville, Kentucky. Last year was their last. And, these things, though, what we come to find is you start seeing a lot of the same speakers. For the last 4 years, or in the last 4 years, I should say, I have been to more than 30 events. And I have seen the same speakers with the same presentations at least 14 out of my 30 times. To be honest, I go to these events to see different things. Now, I grant you, and I understand, not everybody gets to go to that many of them. And so you might only see one or two of these events in 5 years, and therefore everything is fresh. But what I would say to you, Mr. or Miss Presenter, take a look at your presentations and maybe consider freshening them up a little bit. You don't have to change your topic entirely, but go back and re-research it. Has things changed? Has attack vectors changed? Have methodologies changed? Or is what you spoke about no longer really that big of a deal, and your great knowledge can be shared by talking about a different topic altogether? Even in the same year, if you're going to speak at, say, one event, and then you're going out a few months to do this event, and you're going to do some small regional event, have 2 or 3 different presentations in your hip pocket and change things up. Those of us that are in the field will absolutely love you for giving us different content. And none of us are really top only, experts in everything, right? Some of us might be really great at the tools we sell or the company that we work for, the tools that we support there. Others of us might not really use tools, and we just get into Notepad or command line, and maybe there's some new code or some different script methods or some different ideas altogether that you can share with us. And those are the kind of things I think most security experts are looking for, or security practitioners, whether they're beginning, student level, CIO level, a CISSP like myself, or certified ethical hacker and MCSE and all the other 19 other certifications that I own. I'm not a paper cert. I've been in this field for more than 20 years, and still today, I still see things that I'm thinking, where did that come from, and who thought of doing that? So to think that I can't learn is crazy, and to think that there isn't anything that I can tell you about that you've never heard of or never considered is equally crazy. You might know most of everything I say, and you might already be experienced with that, and that's great. I might know most of the things you talk about, and that's great. But that one time that you say that one thing, or that I say that one thing, that can flip a switch and make all the difference, you never know when that nugget is coming. So I beg you, if you're doing the presenting, please consider that. And if you're redoing the same old stale presentations for months or years at a time, please change it. That's all I can say. Oh, and the caveat here is, if you work for a vendor and you're giving presentations on your stuff that you sell, that's a different story. But if you're a researcher or a practitioner and you're doing something, maybe you're doing something that we've all done in the past. Maybe you're using Nessus or some other tool, and you're going to pass the hash. But maybe you're kind of found a different way to do things. Maybe you're looking at different ways that could be used against people. Many of us might know what that is. Some might not. But if you've got a new way, that's a great thing for those of us that are blue teamers that want to protect our environments, right? Let me give you one quick example. So myself and a few others took a look at ransomware, right? Any ransomware, it doesn't matter. I won't tell you which version we looked at. We're not trying to compromise anybody, so before you get on me for that. But the theory we're working on is, what if I hit you with a ransomware attack? But what if I've already been on your network for more than a few months, and I've already kind of reconned your network, and I kind of already know where the data is that I want, and I already have good access, good passwords, logins and passwords to the level I need, or I've created my own accounts, whatever I've needed to do. And then I hit you with ransomware. Now, what if during my recon, I put together all the data from your environment that I wanted, and I kind of hid it somewhere else? Maybe I hid it on the storage of one of your printers because you left your HTTP open, and I was able to browse into the drive of your printer, or some other type of low-level device that nobody pays attention to. And then once I've taken the data, that way I didn't exfiltrate your data. It didn't leave your network. All I did was copy it from point A to point B, but then I attacked your desktops and your servers with ransomware. Now, your firewall, your firewall is going to see a whole bunch of traffic, right? It's going to see all this traffic from these different devices reaching out and getting encryption codes from a CNC server and encrypting your data. And you're going to spend all this time remediating or investigating this data. And you're going to be looking at my ransomware attack. And you're going to be worried about, can you recover? Do you need to pay me? But what if during all that time, while that traffic is passing, I'm using a covert channel, maybe steganography or something else, and now I'm exfiltrating that data from your printer? How many of you are looking at the data off of a printer? Raise your hands. How many of you scan your printers for remediations? I can tell you that, to my knowledge, to this day, 2020, only HP and Kyocera have worked with NIST and others to be included in those frameworks so that you can scan those, check them out on, automated. But what if you've got some other Canon printer and whoever put that Canon printer in didn't change the administrative password? So I can still hit HTTPS, maybe open up a FTP port or SSH port or something else on that printer, and then I can start using that as my storage. Maybe I even loaded my malware onto that printer. So instead of your firewall seeing the command and control server outside for the ransomware, maybe it's all that stuff is talking to your printer and getting its encryption key from there. Because maybe I don't care if you don't truly reach out and try to pay me the ransom, because my real focus was stealing your data and not just trying to get you to pay. Or maybe I did both. Maybe I didn't load anything on your printer from a ransomware perspective, and maybe I want to see if I can get you to pay, and I want to exfiltrate your data and use it against you. So keep that in mind, that when you have a ransomware attack, we're using that as a proof of concept that a multi-tier and multi-vector attack is truly happening. Because right now, media and IT departments are so focused on ransomware, right, and blocking it, turning off SMB and watching my shares and all the other things, making sure my USBs are disconnected, that they forget when they're writing their monitoring rules that they're looking at inside out, outside in, and so many forget lateral, side to side. Hey, why did this data go from a server to a printer? And even a very quick look, even if you're very quickly just monitoring, what if you see, oh, that's the printer's IP, that's just a printed document, but you didn't really look at the protocol, SSH. Why would a server SSH to a printer unless you've got secure printing or some other things going on, right? But the chances of missing that are so high when in reality it's an attack vector. So just something to consider. And all of that is to circle back and say that nobody that I have ever seen present in the last 4 years has truly talked about a multi-vector attack in a way that uses two different things. Not two versions of ransomware, but ransomware and data exfiltration. Usually ransomware doesn't exfiltrate data. Usually, not always. Anyway, just an example of presentations. If any of you go out and do a presentation on this, what I just gave you, you'll find out that I have given that presentation once. And you'd hate to have somebody say that you copied me, but I will tell you this very publicly. I give anybody permission to do that. If that is a topic you want to present and you want to create your own proof of concept about how that could be, I would be honored if you would attribute the initial idea to me and let people know that you heard it from me. But if you want to act like it's your own thing, I won't tell on you. So, all right. Well, I'm a little bit over, about 3-4 minutes over, longer than I meant to be, but that's okay. Great conversation. I hope that it evoked some new thought. Even if you're like, dude, none of that is relevant to me today, that's okay. If you think, wow, I've never heard any of that before, it's a good idea, that's okay too. And again, please, at BYOS Radio, hit me up on Twitter. I don't do Instagram much. Twitter is really about my main social media. So hit me up there. I'd appreciate it. Love to hear from you. And stay tuned week to week, as each Sunday now throughout 2020, with a few exceptions. While I'm on vacation or might be traveling to some of these events, I might take a few Sundays off throughout the year. But otherwise, set your RSS feeds to grab this podcast now on Sundays. It used to be Thursdays. And I will upload a new podcast somewhere around 8 o'clock on Sunday nights. If you tune into the Spreaker.com application, or you go to bringyourownSecurityRadio.net, and listen to me live there. You'll be able to hear this in real time. Again, I am Dave the IT Guy. This is Bring Your Own Security Radio. I thank you for spending your time with me. And don't forget, if you have certifications, submit this, listen to this podcast for a CPE on your, or a CEU on your certifications. Other than that, have a great January, and I'll talk to you again soon. I am Dave the IT Guy. Good night.